Are we ready to start, Melissa?
We are.
Okay. So I'll welcome everybody back. And if you're not on mute, I'll ask you to put yourselves on mute. And this is also being recorded. So one of the great pleasures of Women in Philanthropy is introducing members to a wide variety of people and programs associated with UCLA. Today, we have several special presenters and an amazing new program to share with you. Already a leader in the emerging field of food studies with an anonymous gift of $13.5 million, UCLA has established the Rothman Family Institute for Food Studies devoted to research, teaching, and food policy. Food represents a powerful and accessible entry point into any field. With local, national, and global repercussions, this is also true at UCLA and the impact the study of food is having. Increasingly, scholars are studying food, its production, preparation, sharing, consumption, and disposal to better understand and tackle global challenges such as climate change, health, and social disparities, and labor conditions, and to improve access to information. Today, we will learn about the scope of the new institute as one of the most intrinsically multidisciplinary areas across the UCLA campus, covering everything from science and public policy to anthropology and athletics, and have a fun and informative cooking demonstration. Our presenters are Julia Raton, UCLA Culinary Arts Coordinator, Chef, UCLA Teaching Kitchen. Marcy Rothman, retired culinary consultant, writer, and media personality, and Women in Philanthropy member. Amy Rowat, Associate Professor and Vice Chair of Graduate Education in the Department of Integrative Biology and Physiology at UCLA. Marcy H. Rothman, Presidential Chair in Food Studies. You're welcome to ask questions throughout the presentation. Please submit them using the chat function on the bottom of the screen, directing them to Melissa. They will be reviewed and consolidated by Melissa, who will pose them to the presenters. So with that, we'd like to welcome the Rothman
Family.
The Rothman Family Institute for Food Studies. Thanks.
Yep.
That's us.
Here's the intro.
Ah. Hey.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the UCLA Teaching Kitchen. We're really excited to have you. I'm Julia Roten. As she said, I'm the Culinary Arts Coordinator and often the chef instructor here in the Teaching Kitchen. And we're really excited to have you here for this demo. Thank you for letting us be a part of your meeting today.
And I'm Marcy Rothman, and I know it's a mouthful to try to say the Rothman Family Institute for Food Studies, but I'm delighted to be able to welcome you to the kitchen, as well as what we're going to do today, and to tell you a little bit about what the Institute is up to and what we're doing and why we made it such an important part of the university. What we've done is make the Institute is and will become even more a hub for numerous parts of the university, one of which is where Amy is, down in the sciences. Another is the UCLA, the Resnick Center for Law. Another is the Medical Center and the Medical School. We've changed the curriculum, I believe, at the school to include students who want to do a whole, I believe it's a year in nutrition. Is that, yes?
I think it's going to be part of their new curriculum as their
Yes,
year
it's-
of exploration.
So we have a lot going on in terms of what we do and what the Institute is going to do. And today we're going to show you just why we're so excited, just because one of the pieces of the Institute is this kitchen. And it serves as an area as a place for students, for community, for getting together. We know that food, it sustains us and it completes us when we all need it. But having it so that we can all be a part of it is what this kitchen is also about. And what Julia does and what Amy does are very much important pieces of having the students and the community, the outside community too. Because one of the other things that the Institute is is already involved in is putting together a chef in residence. And Amy, you can talk just for a second about the chef in residence, because that's up her alley.
Right. Well, it's just a delight to be here today with you guys. There's no better way to spend a Tuesday lunchtime. I'm Amy Rowett. I'm a associate professor of integrative biology and physiology. So I have a research lab that's dedicated to advancing human and planetary health, and part of the way we do that is through engineering novel foods and that are more sustainable and also healthful. I also teach classes for both in physiological sciences and also food studies, which I have the great opportunity to do through Marcy's support. And we make great use of both the teaching kitchen space here, as well as other spaces on campus as well, such as the Sunset Recreation Garden, where we can give students sort of hands-on experiences in food and cooking, which is a gateway into understanding more about scientific processes and fundamentals in physics and chemistry and biology. But also we use food and cooking as a lens to discuss more challenging topics and societal challenges that we're dealing with, from climate change to social justice issues. So using food as a way to, we can think about, issues in food access and health disparities in a way that really engages students and of all backgrounds, of all disciplinary backgrounds. So the Teaching Kitchen is a really great outlet for students to be able to have this hands-on experience, and as Marcy mentioned, having chefs involved, such as Chef Julia, and we also invite chefs from the greater Los Angeles community as well as the greater California. And in fact, we've had chefs from all over the world come to UCLA, from Brazil and Denmark
and the Germans.
And the Germans as well, Germany as well, to bring their experience and their approach to food and cooking. And so being able to have sustained support for a chef in residence program where chefs will be able to come and interact in a more sustained way with UCLA students and faculty is part of the vision of the Rothman Family Institute for Food Studies.
And before we get cooking, just a little bit of a moment about how I got involved with this creation of the Institute and also with the kitchen. And part of it is we're all, my family, my parents, my sister, who is also a member of Women in Philanthropy, as you probably all know. We've been longtime Bruins. My mother was a great cook. We grew up in the San Fernando Valley, fresh seasonal food all the time. Yes, I graduated with a political science degree, but oh well, follow your passion, and food was it. So this became something about 6 years ago when I went into the library to ask what to do with my expanding cookbook collection. There was about 15, they still have about 1,500 cookbooks. And from that came, well, we've just started a minor in food studies. Perhaps you'd like to be involved and get to know what's going on with that. So I got involved, and from that became the chair, and things just kept going. The kitchen came along, and I'd say the kitchen became the impetus for actually what was what has become the Institute, of putting all of these pieces together and what is going on campus, and the interdisciplinary piece of, as Amy explained, it takes in everything, because food touches everything, everywhere that we're involved in, and it sustains us. It keeps us connected, and we're doing it. We're looking at it from here as a local, part of the university, but then beyond that, that this will be a global, and we already are reaching a global audience. So that was my involvement, and I'm, my sister and I are very excited about the whole piece of it. Excuse me, the piece of it, and just being able to engage all of you, and I'm ready to get cooking. So
Yes.
Let's do it.
Because I'm hungry.
Perfect. So to tie some of all of that together, we have a pretty fun demo put together. We did an activity with students in the Chef in Residence program while discussing climate, while discussing food science, and the implications of food and its connectivities to society and everything that kind of comes together with food. We were doing a tasting on burgers. We did a meat burger, all beef patty, and then we did one of the new plant-based sort of created meat burgers, and the students loved it. It was an amazing experience for them as well as the rest of us. We learned a lot from it. And so we thought that it would be a fun recipe to demonstrate. We're going to put together some tasty treats. We're going to make some caramelized onions. We're going to demonstrate a vinaigrette. So whether this is something that you actually want to duplicate and make at home, if anyone is interested, we can definitely provide a recipe for this. But we also just wanted you to see some of the fun and learning that happens in this space. So we're all going to kind of break into our little tasks. I can chop up some onions so that we can start caramelizing all of those. We're going to be cooking burgers. Maybe while I'm chopping up some onions really quickly, is there anything else that we wanted to highlight or talk about? Or
Let's see. Oh, I can chop too.
yeah, let's
Here,
all chop.
Do you want to start? How long do those burgers taste?
Not very long.
Okay.
Yeah.
We were also talking about the burger piece. The three of us have talked about these. So the burgers you're talking about are?
So we have some all beef patties that are made with some high-end cuts like sirloin and brisket. Yep.
Yeah.
And some chuck and short ribs, some good quality beef. We also have some Beyond Burgers
Burger.
that we're working with today.
Yeah.
I specifically picked this brand up because it was the one on sale. And I'll tell you, having spent the last 3 years
wow.
working with students, they are always looking for the food on sale. So it
That's
really
true.
comes to play when we try to incorporate these foods into our workshops with the student body and the student population specifically, to try to keep that budget in mind. But
Yeah, I can expand a little bit. You know,
Please.
the Beyond Burger also I know quite well. I was tapped to be a scientific advisor for Beyond Meat when they were developing their
burger.
plant-based
Ah.
burger. That was about 10 years ago or so, and it was through my involvement, the class that I've developed here on science and food that uses science, food and cooking to engage students in learning science concepts. I think that's how Beyond Meat found out about what was happening
Amazing.
in here at UCLA. So I think it was an interesting scientific challenge to think about how we would use plant-based ingredients to create a material that changes color when you cook it, that also browns, that has the same kind of like marbling of like flecks of fat that are really important for the flavor and mouthfeel of a burger as well. So the Beyond Burger, as many of you know now, has really expanded in popularity. I mean, you can find it really anywhere now. It is a pea protein base, and we were also interested to inspect the label of Beyond Meat, of the Beyond Meat burger. That because, you know, understanding where our food comes from and what's in our food, what ingredients are in our food, is also something that we're very aware of and try to promote here in the teaching kitchen as well.
Right.
So I know that that's one of the kind of critiques of these plant-based meat products, is that they have a lot of different ingredients, and some of which we don't recognize, and they do have more sodium is one sort of additive that, and also the coconut fat as well. So these are things to be aware of with the Beyond Burger. However, if you're, they also have been shown to have a lower environmental impact overall compared to conventionally produced beef burger. And so if you're making food choices based on environmental considerations, that could be an advantage for a plant-based product like this. But in the class, I think one of the fascinating points of discussion was that, these plant-based burgers are one option. There's also, different ways that livestock are being raised, like using regenerative methods, for example, that have a very different, actually there can be benefits, environmental benefits, in terms of soil health, in terms of the reduced antibiotic use. Some of these major environmental and also human health concerns of conventional livestock agriculture are less of a concern for regeneratively produced beef. So again, just being aware of where food comes from and how you're sourcing food that you buy was one of the kind of major take-home messages, I think, of that session that we had, and which kind of tied into the tasting that you did, and as well, which the students just loved your sessions, Chef.
It was so much fun, and was eye-opening for me as well. I think that based on marketing or just sort of general lack of knowledge, a lot of people kind of assume that a plant-based burger is automatically going to be healthier, but there's a lot of knowledge that comes into play into making these decisions. And so making sure that out of this kitchen, we ensure that our students are getting all of the background information to make those healthy decisions, like as they journey through their life. We want to make sure, it's not technically written in our mission statement here for the UCLA Teaching Kitchen, but I like to guarantee that at UCLA, we make sure that our students get the most incredible education. They get to be educated by doctors like Dr. Rowett and some of the most profoundly brilliant people on the planet. And a lot of them can't make an egg or cook rice or these basic life skills, and we want to make sure that their educations are as well-rounded as possible. And I think that the kitchen can play an important part in not just giving them the background information to make those healthy choices, but also the hands-on skills to then put into practice. And that was a great workshop that brought it all together. And we do a lot of those types of things. Some of our classes are through recreation, some of them are affiliated with academic programs. We're making some delicious caramelized onions. Yeah, you can adjust the heat up and down. We work with induction burners in this kitchen. I know. And as in California, we move more towards electric cooking. Actually, induction burners are a really great resource for us to be able to use to teach our students how they can then feed themselves on this changing technology in our ever-changing world. So trying to make things as sustainable as a model as possible. So while we're working on these caramelized onions, I'm going to get started cooking off some of the burgers, and I'm going to demonstrate a beef burger in one, and then let me zoom over, and one of the Beyond Burgers in the other. And I think that just while I'm kind of searing these, it'll be able to demonstrate the differences in how they cook, which might be appealing to some of you, but we could also get started on our emulsification. We have a really fun ingredient or little thing that we're adding to our burger. We're going to top this with some balsamic vinaigrette and some other yumminess that we'll put on later. But Amy is going to make the vinaigrette.
I can deal with that. Yeah. And meantime, also, if there's any questions anyone has, happy to address those. Just enter in the chat, or if it's easier for you, just unmute yourself, and I think we can't do that. Okay, sorry. Technically not possible. So enter your questions in the chat, and we'll answer them live. Okay, so we'll get started with the vinaigrette. So we have some nice extra virgin olive oil here, and
let's move these guys.
A little bit of balsamic as well, and some Dijon. The Dijon here is going to be our emulsifier. This is actually something I teach in my science and food class.
We're going to move you over here.
Okay, perfect.
There you go.
It's something I teach in my science and food class. Emulsions are really ubiquitous in food and cooking, and also in other applications as well. But you can find them in vinaigrettes, in mayonnaise, aiolis. Butter is also a form of emulsion as well, where emulsion is just a suspension of one liquid in another liquid. So tiny droplets that are suspended in another liquid. And in this case, we're going for a tiny droplets of the balsamic in the olive oil. So I'll just add in a little bit of balsamic, and this can be really sort of tailored to your taste. I'm just putting a little bit into this container. How much do I need to make, actually? Oh, just a small amount, so this should be good, right?
Yeah, I think you're okay.
And then I'll put in a little bit of the Dijon as well. So the mustard actually has some molecules that are called lecithin that are in the mustard seeds, which act as the emulsifier. So these are molecules that like both the oil and the water. And so they sit right between the oil and water droplets and help to stabilize or keep those tiny droplets stable over time. So it keeps that form of the emulsion. So I'm just going to use a little fork here to blend a little bit, but you can also just simply do this in a jar. This is a beautiful little container here that's super handy. Okay, so then I like to add a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper as well, and then some oil. And depending on how tangy you want your vinaigrette, and you guys professional chefs, please jump in here. I feel a little intimidated.
I'm not a professional
I'm just
chef.
a hobby
but
chef.
Well,
so-
and so that's because I'm sure maybe one of the questions might have come up, and I'm going to answer it, is you didn't measure anything.
No, I just did it by eye.
By
Yeah.
eye, and so that's the important part of being, of making your own vinaigrette or doing a lot of these recipes, is to taste it. And to, do it to your taste. You want more mustard, put a little more mustard in.
Does this look okay to you guys? I like
Shake
to
it up.
have, I like to have just, the majority oil, a small amount of the,
That's a good way to...
a small amount of the vinegar. But again, if you want something more tangy,
More vinegar.
add more vinegar.
We actually
Okay.
have a question. Maybe we
Oh,
could
a
chime in.
question.
Yeah.
Yes, we have a question. Does it matter what kind of oil and what the measurements are?
Great question.
I feel like a vinaigrette is pretty forgiving in terms of measurements.
I
Like,
think so.
You can just kind of eyeball it. I would eyeball it, to make a quick vinaigrette. You can see that this is nicely emulsified because you don't see, it looks all cloudy, so the little vinegar droplets are suspended in the oil. You've got the mustard in there as well. The oil, it depends, again, the purpose, but I love flavorful oil, so extra virgin is great. I've been enjoying lately using walnut oil in a vinaigrette as well.
Sparingly,
Yeah.
because otherwise you kind of blow out your, it's
It has
one
a
of those...
highly flavored.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But those kinds of
or sesame.
neutral oils are great for making vinaigrette. We usually recommend like avocado or safflower seed. Sunflower seed oils are also really good. What I was always taught was most vinaigrettes are looking for a 1:3 or 1:2 ratio, depending on the strength of the vinegar. So it would be 1 part vinegar to 2 parts oil, but if you want it tangy, or less tangy, you vary from there.
Right.
Right? Is that generally what you eyeball?
Generally. I
Yeah.
might even do like 1 to 4, just because sometimes having the oil flavors, I like the oil
It depends
oil
again on the
flavor,
oil.
right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So here we have a vinaigrette, and I wanted to make the vinaigrette. I sort of imposed the vinaigrette onto the menu today because it's also a great example of our work in the lab. So my lab actually uses emulsions as one of the tools that we use for studying cells and how they respond to physical, mechanical cues in their environment. So specifically, we're working on developing a new way to grow meat that doesn't involve slaughtering an animal. This is otherwise known as cultured meat. Should be cultured meat or lab-grown meat, which is these products are not yet available commercially in the United States. You can buy them in Singapore, but
really?
sort of the next frontier and the alternative protein field. So the idea with these cultured or lab-grown meats is that we can grow meat with a very reduced environmental footprint. So you don't need as much land. You don't have as much greenhouse gas emission that accompanies the cultured meat burger, for example. And the way that happens is by taking cells from the muscle of an animal that is not killed, it's just a biopsy, and then growing these cells in a large vessel. So fermentation is widely used in these large bioreactor vessels, are already used in the food industry, and for making beer, for example. And the idea is to grow the cells and the tissue, the muscle tissue, which is meat, in these large vessels. But that comes with a challenge because cells that are part of our body, many of the cells in our body are naturally attached to some surface, and this allows them to pull and flex and generate biological tension, which is important for especially a muscle.
Right.
And so to be able to provide the cells something to attach to, my lab has been making tiny scaffolds or beads that the cells can attach to and grow in a bioreactor vessel. So we make an emulsion just like this, except instead of the vinegar, we use water that has some gelatin in it, and then the gelatin solidifies into a little micron scale bead of Jell-O, essentially. These beads are even smaller than the width of a hair from your head, so we can see them under a microscope, and they're about the same size as cells. So our cells from the cow are able to attach to these beads, and then we can grow them in this kind of vessel that can accommodate the growth of a lot of cells on beads. So this is one way that we think we can scale up. We can make larger quantities of muscle or meat using this process that can be more sustainable. We can tune the nutrient profile as well to have a healthful sort of fat composition or even higher protein content. So that's the vision, growing meat with a lower environmental footprint. Yeah, we don't have the samples yet available for the demo today because we're still operating on a very small scale, but this emulsion is a good sort of
It's a
proxy
basic.
of what we do in the lab.
Wow.
Yeah.
Something so simple can turn into something so incredibly advanced and
Yes,
important.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's really, again, just an example of how we can tie like food systems together in some of the most important and beneficial ways, but stemming from what is really ancient food science here. You know, a vinaigrette
Right.
making emulsions, that goes back as far as we have been kind of putting foods together as human animals. And so
Right.
now that we can take that incredible science and turn it into like the future of food science I love it. And I love that we get to teach it and learn it and experience it all out of the Food Institute and the Teaching Kitchen.
And this is one of the things that also makes it the Institute become a global reach. I mean, your research and this kind of thing is what people are looking at all over the world. So, and we need it because with famines and hurricanes and flooding and all of these things that are going on, it becomes a really important piece
Totally.
of where are we going to get food to feed the world. Is really
Yeah, many of us experienced during the pandemic, these disruptions in food supply chains, and I think there's going to be more disruptions into the future due to climate and natural disasters, and so having, I think, food, our vision is, accessible, nutrient-rich food for everyone, because I think we are going to need to have multiple ways to produce protein in the future, and animal protein is a super nutrient accessible food as well.
Yeah.
Exactly. You know, it's kind of changing the subject a little bit, but we were also noting that a lot of the students in the Daily Bruin and we've been getting, how do I say this? Students that they're living in apartments or off campus, but they're starting to pay attention to what they eat and, you know, the availability of Julia being able to come to a class. And or even, you know, gee, what am I cooking? And, you know, they have a small kitchen, they have no kitchen, they have some sort of this, you know, and it's not uncommon. I don't know whether we've talked about it a little bit, but the number of students that we serve on a basis that there's about 35 to 40% of the students here are food insecure. And what does that mean? It means they don't have the money, they don't have the place to cook.
Right. They don't know exactly where their next meal might be coming from. And the ability to teach them at least to turn simple ingredients and
Right.
basic resources into foods that can nourish their bodies is a really important goal
So
of
critical.
this kitchen. Yeah, and we work with the medical school, the nursing school, the School of Public Health, all of the undergrad programs, and staff and faculty wellness programs to try to ensure that our community is getting access to those resources so that when they do have access to food, they know what to do with them, whether that's in a microwave or, as you see, you know, a full service burger spread. We want to make sure that they get access to that kind of confidence building and like life skill building resource. We're lucky enough that we get to work with some amazing groups on campus that help organize, like the community programs office really helps to ensure that students' basic needs are being met, and we work with a number of different campus groups that do that. And working with all different kinds of academic programs all obviously gets to branch out like what we do, and then we take that and teach it to as many of our students as we possibly can. So not just Amy students get to like benefit or capitalize off of the meat tasting, but the knowledge that we gain from that, we then get to pay it forward and spread it
And I
more.
must say that during the pandemic,
It's gonna
Oh, true.
Yeah.
the kitchen was able to totally pivot and stay in business, as it were. We were doing classes. I did classes from my home. You were doing classes, but you also reached out to LA Unified. So
We did a number of programs just that first summer, 2020, through LAUSD, and some amazing project coordinators through the Healthy Campus Initiative helped to organize most of those, where students who normally don't have access to as much food at home, they normally get the majority of their meals from LAUSD schools. They were still going to campuses to be fed, and so they were also being integrated into a food and science program, which was a summer camp program that we were all amazing and lucky enough to be a part of. So that the small physical scope of this room does nothing to show
So what
the huge reach that this kitchen has and the programs. I think there's maybe another question.
There was. The question is, did you put any oil to cook the meat?
Great question. No, I did not. So working with the beef burgers, this depends on the blend that you buy, but I was working with an 80-20 blend. So there's a high enough fat content in that it's going to render out. And I don't want to add any fat to it because, there's plenty to begin with. So we're going to make sure that we don't need to add too much to that situation. I also prefer to cook in cast iron pans for that reason. They tend to be naturally non-stick, and so you can use less cooking fats in that situation. And then for the plant-based burgers, the Beyond Burgers, I also did not have to add any fats to this. If you're using a pan that's not non-stick, let's say just a plain stainless steel pan, you could use a little pan spray for this, maybe just to ensure it doesn't stick. But again, these Beyond Burgers, they have their own fat content, usually from coconut oils. So that's going to render out when it cooks. And this way we can help ensure that our fat intake has been kept as low as possible, but that we're getting the fat from the actual flavor of the food. Really great question, though. Really, really good question.
which kind of blends back into reading the label.
Exactly.
Because we were reading the label, and the difference in the fat actually is kind of, well, the fat here, did we look at this one?
Yep.
Well, in the beef, there's 22 grams. And in one of these guys, one of them, if you were having one burger, it's 14 grams of fat in a protein-based. So, we're not saying don't do it. We're just saying read those labels and be able to make your own decisions about what or sodium. I mean, all the buzzwords that we're all dealing with right now.
Sure. People are making these decisions for a lot of different reasons. Like
Right.
Amy said, if it's an environmental motivation, then these burgers can be a really huge impact on some of the choices that you make. But again, if you have the wherewithal or the means or the accessibility to buy that kind of pasture-raised beef, that could be even more beneficial. And then if you're making certain food choices based on health, then those are different choices altogether, and then you might look at different products like Marcy has.
I mean, these are one of the original, vegetarian burgers that are more, that are in here is the carrot. The first ingredients are water, carrots, onions, soy protein, so it's soy, mushrooms, water, chestnuts. I mean, it's got stuff going on but these were when you think about vegetarian burgers, this was. So you have a lot of choices.
That and tofurkey, right? That was one of the
originals, yeah.
Yeah. I think the emulsion.
If you want to
Another
shake
question?
and reshake.
We have another question.
Oh, perfect.
Question.
I was just going to get us ready to plate.
So the question is, it seems to me that it used to be that coconut oil is one of the worst types of oil nutritionally, but now it seems that is no longer true. Could you provide info on the nutrients characteristics?
As far as I understand it, you're still fairly accurate. Coconut oil is not one of the most nutritionally sound of the cooking fats. You can think of it like butter. Think of your cooking fats in terms of do they get solid at room temperature? Then they have more saturated fat. So if a butter or a coconut, how they're solid when they're in the jar or kind of at room temperature or cool enough, then you can imagine them becoming solid in your body. That's how I try to kind of remember my cooking fats.
Yes.
Cooking fats that stay liquid are usually more heart healthy.
Good. Okay.
Okay, so you are right that coconut oil does have a little bit more, but used in moderation and used to season our food or to add to certain things like curries, they can be part of a really well-balanced diet for sure. If you're using coconut oil as your main cooking oil, you're probably going to be raising your intake of saturated fat. Yeah. It's a really good question too, very, very important, and that's probably why if we look at those labels, the fat content on the Beyond Burger is actually not that much lower than the beef burger. It does have its own fat content for sure, and they do that so that it tastes and feels like a beef burger.
Right.
So more questions can obviously come in. We're going to actually start putting together some of our burgers now. Just to kind of finish the quick demo and leave time for more chatting. We have got some quick caramelized onions here that Marcy did perfectly. You don't have to cook them for hours and hours. You just want to cook them kind of low and slow and make sure that you're letting those natural sugars caramelize. Hence the name, caramelized onions. It's when the sugars cook, we get caramel. And so we're going to mix some of our onions with some of our deliciously seasoned arugula with our wonderful homemade balsamic vinaigrette. We're going to mix in some sun-dried tomatoes that I have here just because we're going to go for a little of an Italiano vibe today, feeling fun and like we're going on vacation. So we're going to mix in some of these tomatoes right into our arugula. And if you want to put in some of your delicious onions.
So I have a question. When you do caramelized onions, some recipes call for a pinch of sugar to help with the caramelization. So do you do that, or do you do it pretty straight?
I do it straight, and that's because I tend to use sweeter onions. So I'll use a white or a red onion for caramelizing. And they have a slightly higher natural sugar kind of sweetness to them. If you are using just straight brown onions, then you want to, I just find giving them more time
Yeah, it just
develops
is
more
low
of the
slope,
flavor.
right.
Hmm.
I do the same. Although in a pinch, if I'm in a rush, then a little bit of
Pinch and
sugar
sugar.
helps.
Oh,
kind of-
that's
Yeah.
funny. Do you know what my in a rush is? I'll turn them on incredibly high heat, let them caramelize almost aggressively, and then add water to deglaze the pan,
right.
which brings all of the color out and
Ah.
makes them look
Looks
like
like-
they've been caramelized for
Nice.
hours and hours, when in fact
little
it took
kitchen
me
hacks here.
5 minutes. Don't tell anybody.
Nice.
We have
So,
another question, actually, but yeah, keep scooping some of these in here.
do you want them all in?
Yeah.
Yes, another question. Did you put garlic on the onions?
Yes.
I saw her adding something.
That was garlic. Yes.
We did. And I know that a real dietitian would be able to tell you some of the more facts about why, but we just know that garlic is incredibly good for us. In fact, the dietitians are still finding out, seems like every day, something new about why the garlic is so good for us. But we've been incorporating it in our food, not only as a flavor enhancer, but sort of a anti-inflammatory and, all around holistic medication for centuries. So whenever you can, add some garlic. That's what I like to say. So you see I'm just mixing up some of the arugula with our beautiful balsamic, caramelized onions, garlic, and sun-dried tomatoes. I'm going to set that aside. Whoop. And we have just some nice restaurant-style brown buns. When I'm teaching the students, I really try to get them to lean towards whole wheat, even if they don't necessarily like it in all aspects of their life. I say, okay, well, if it's a burger, at least you can convince trick your palate into eating something healthy, because
Right.
you'll still just taste the burger. Okay,
Right.
but it's a great way to integrate some of those whole grains into your diet. And they always tell me, oh, you know what? Couldn't even taste the difference. Like, success.
But talking about labels, I mean, I think another interesting
Oh,
thing
yes.
is that might be the added sugar that's
Yeah.
Yes.
typically
Definitely.
in a processed bread. So any kind of supermarket bread,
Especially this.
especially this. So 6 grams of added
sugar.
per bun. So, which is another important factor that's become more, I think,
Yeah.
recognized recently is the amount of added sugar that we're consuming. So,
Well, and luckily we've changed the label recently.
So the label on this, the first is the unbleached flour, and then after the flour is liquid sugar.
Yeah,
there you
these
are.
are not the healthiest
Right.
buns.
So just, again, there's only 2 grams of fat, but then you look at your sugars. So
Right.
it's this trade-off.
And it usually is a trade-off with processed food, because when they take one thing away, like salt or sugar, they have to replace it
So
with
with-
something to make it taste good to you, the consumer. And that's usually going to be sugar if it's not salt, or salt if it's not sugar.
Exactly.
And so that's probably one of the biggest benefits to this kitchen and its integration into students' lives, is just that small knowledge of, if you make it yourself, you can be in control of
Right.
all of
All of
those
your food.
nutrients.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. So we've got some of our lovely dressed arugula, tomatoes, and onions on our
Yes.
beef burger, and then also on our Beyond Burger. So no matter what lifestyle choices you make based on your protein intake, you can have an incredibly delicious and also fairly nutritious zoom in.
Zoom in. There we are.
You can get a really nice little meal here, whether it's a weeknight meal or a lunch option for friends, something like that. It's quite nice, very Californian, and
What makes it-
California meets Italian.
Yeah.
exactly. We're the American Mediterranean, right?
So that's
Beautiful.
the
This is the beef.
And
then-
Julie, you'd also thought about an aioli here, which I think would be also fantastic and delicious with this combo on your burger.
Absolutely. And then here we have our Beyond Burger. So if I hold one, that's our Beyond. And then our meat.
Interesting. Yeah.
Let's see if you can,
There you go.
real close up. Yeah. Beyond
And meat.
meat. So they did a pretty good job of duplicating texture and color. And I guess it's up to you to do some tasting if you're interested in kind of comparing the quality. But more than anything, just a quick little demo of some of the healthy and fun types of ingredients and recipes that we work with here in the Teaching Kitchen.
15 minutes. Okay. We got a lot of.
We've got some time, I know. Well, I would love to leave it open for any other questions or comments
Yes.
and things that people would like to talk about the kitchen as a whole or the Food Institute specifically.
So we do have another question.
Great.
Probably common, but are cast iron pans with 2 handles readily available?
Like the ones that we're working with here with the handle in the back, yes. This can be purchased from Lodge directly. The Lodge brand is a great company and provider of cast iron, and they come pre-seasoned. You just make sure that you're looking for the one that has the extra handle on the side. This does make it much easier to lift and maneuver. Let me zoom back out. And then I think that Target and a couple of other retailers have their own brands now of cast iron. I'm not sponsored, but I would definitely still push you in the direction of Lodge because they're just
Well-known and
well-known. They're reliable. They have great warranties. They have really good directions and instructions on how to care for your pans. They'll teach you in a video. You know, it's a really good company.
Great value too, those products.
Well worth it. I've had my grandmother's Lodge cast iron since she passed, and I plan to pass it on to my niece. They'll live longer than most of us if you take care of them.
Yeah.
But yes, these are widely available now with the handle on the
that's
back.
good. It's still heavy.
This can be heavy. This is a 10-inch, which can be kind of large for most families' needs. If you use the 8-inch skillet, that is the standard size. Yeah. Great question.
Julia, what sparked your interest in food?
Oh boy, I could go on for the rest of the time talking about how I really got started, but mostly it was my grandmother and my family's influence. My grandmother taught me to cook when I was about 3. She got me started making apple crisp in the kitchen with her.
There you go.
And we, maybe the hippie background of my parents, but also our very, very low middle class background, we didn't have a lot of toys. So in the bath, I played with the egg beaters and mixing bowls, and I would mix all the shampoos, and I would make all these potions. And some of my earliest memories are playing with my food and playing with kitchen toys. So I can't pinpoint the thing, but in my early 20s, I had left college. I was confused about what I was doing. I was working in film and television, and the Food Network was just becoming all the rage. And someone said, "Oh, you should go to culinary school. You're pretty good." And 2 weeks later, I was at Le Cordon Bleu.
So there.
And I just sort of jumped at it, and almost 20 years later, now here I am. So I was in catering most of my career. I've been really, really lucky to be able to work in Los Angeles most of my time. And I got my degree, eventually went back to school in elementary school education. So I am blessed with being able to teach and cook all day. I don't know how I got so lucky.
Well, we're so grateful that you're here now at UCLA, so we're very appreciative of that.
It's a good team.
And how did you get?
How did I get into food? Similar. I mean, when I was like a toddler, I was making muffins with my mom. There's like a famous picture of me in the kitchen sink, like scooping muffin batter, and so I love that. I say that's how I really learned to be a scientist. Was doing experiments in the kitchen and baking. I would record recipes and make observations, and then try it again. And so that was really sort of my gateway into science. I did contemplate going to chef school at one point when I finished college, and then thought, well, I also really love science, and so I ended up going with the science, but still learning how to cook all the way along, and volunteering as a chef at music festivals, and we had an international banquet that I sort of led as an undergrad, and then I think as I was in graduate school, that's when I started realizing these connections between the science I was working on and the food. At that time, I was working on fats and lipids, and thinking about membranes, but clearly all these ingredients like the lecithin was really an important part of the membranes that sort of encapsulate all the cells in our bodies. So, so from there, I started exploring how we could use food and cooking as a way to engage audiences in science, and as a postdoc at Harvard, developed the first science and cooking class there, and then came to UCLA and developed the science and food program, and have been so fortunate to be able to work with brilliant
Rest is
people like
history,
you.
as they say.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it was a few years ago, you know, that I worked for you know, most of the past like 15 years with food and education, and then a few years ago started getting more into the research in food in my lab as well. So that's also been a fun adventure. So
I think there's
We have
another
a couple
question.
other questions.
Great.
Oh, great.
From the grand scale to focusing on cooking. We'll start with the focusing on cooking. Can you use any kind of mustard to emulsify the vinaigrette, or is Dijon better for some reason?
Just taste.
taste, right?
Yeah.
Taste.
It's better from a culinary standpoint. The French are very particular about which mustard they use, and in their invention of the vinaigrette, Dijon all the way. But if you have some brown deli mustard or yellow mustard, in a pinch, it will absolutely still emulsify. You just might want to balance that flavor out.
It's a little bit more acidic, I feel. Yeah.
Definitely.
But a whole grain mustard, I find could
Yeah.
also work well. Yeah.
And then from a bigger scale question, as you've worked, taught, or engaged with students, what has surprised you the most?
I was going to ask you a similar question when you were talking about, teaching students how to cook basic foods, and but would love, I don't want to implant like.
No, one of those things did kind of wake me up to my own privilege, and I've learned how much of a privilege it was to have been raised by people who taught me how to cook and had me helping in the kitchen, because not everyone gets, I think, that perk. And because it set me on a journey towards like a more healthy, well-rounded outlook on food. I worked with a number of teenagers. This was a high school to college program. They were 17 to 18. It was a baking class. I said to everyone, okay, crack 2 eggs into your bowl. And one of the teenagers just smashed the egg on the table, and I thought he was pranking me, and he was so embarrassed. He did not know how to crack an egg into a bowl. And I was embarrassed, because this was absolutely my own privilege kind of coming forward. I didn't stop to realize that that is something that you have to learn. And so really reining in some of the things that I was teaching some of these students, just remembering that it comes from a really simple and fundamental place with a lot of them, and then some of them are foodies and are getting into it, and so they can take the more advanced classes. And I've kind of designed our programs that way so that our beginners can focus on their fundamentals, and then they can move on from there. But I think that the big picture, the most surprising thing is how many, as Marcy said, how many people are struggling to know where their food is going to come from, who maybe couldn't afford the dining plan, or they don't live on campus anymore, or they're so excited they have their first apartment but can only like half stock the fridge. That was really eye-opening to me, to know that we are in a one of the most incredible colleges and environments for learning, and we still need to kind of step up to make sure that our students are being fed. And we do have incredible programs on campus that do lean into that, like our food pantry through CPO. They were receiving donations given back to them. So some of the students would get rice and then give it back because they didn't know how to cook rice from scratch. And so that was one of the big catalysts for starting some of our programs. And so for me, just making sure that we can provide the basic knowledge and information and education that they need, just like they're getting from their academic resources.
And I can sort of jump on that, as my career in as the media person in television came about because I realized most people are they were my age then, and still maybe even now, but that didn't know how to cook. And this all started with my best girlfriend, who I've known since we were 3 years old in nursery school. And her mom was the quintessential I hate to cook. But I would go to her house for enchiladas, and Kate would come to my house for, whatever my mom was cooking. Nothing fancy, but again, simple, good food. And Kate and I were sharing a birthday, and Marsh, you don't know how to even, she said, I'm going to kill my husband because I burned this and I burned that, and he's a diabetic and he's all of these things. She said, you just open the refrigerator and you put things together. And I said, well, let's see what's in your cupboard. So this was in the late 70s, 1970s. I mean, in your fridge and in your cupboard. Kate, what's with the rice-a-roni? And that was when I started this whole thing about reading labels. She said, but I don't know how to cook rice. I said, Kate, it's on the back of the rice package. They spent a lot of time and money putting those very simple instructions on, and I have taught it a long time over the years. And it's again, putting this down to basics. I mean, I'm not Martha Stewart, I never want to be. I use some of her recipes. However, it's remembering that most people just don't have that, that knowledge. It's not good, bad. It's just, hey, we've got it and we'd love to share it. So then that, I'd say, is what the Institute is a lot about. I mean, there's a lot of knowledge on this campus in many, many areas, as we've talked about, from the law school to the med school to down in the sciences to the humanities. You want to, some of the classes in the food science and food studies minor, it's Chinese food and literature from the, I don't know, some long time ago, or Chaucer, what they were eating during Chaucer. I mean, these incredibly interesting things. So food touches us everywhere. And the Institute is to be, and on its way to be, the hub of all of these areas that are going on campus, so that we have it under one roof. And really, it's to just not monitor, to have everybody not being in their silos, so that campuses tend to be, we're doing this, but then over here somebody's doing this, but they may be very similar. And it's putting what food is about on this campus for everyone to know, from the community, from the college community to the external community, to every one of you who we're talking to, and beyond. And so I'm delighted to be a part of it. I'm delighted that you're a part of it, and certainly all of you that have joined us today that are a part of Women in Philanthropy. And I hope that we've given you a little taste of what the Institute and what the Teaching Kitchen is all about and what we're doing here. So thank you.
Thanks to you guys. This has been so fun.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
So thank you, Julia Raton, Marcy Rothman, Amy Roat, for creating time in your busy schedules to share information about the UCLA Rothman Family Institute for Food Studies and preparing a wonderful cooking demonstration for us. We really, really, really appreciate it. We'd also like to thank Joy McKee and Cassie Ortiz, development officers for the Division of Undergraduate Education, for all of their help crafting this program and connecting with our fabulous speakers today. And to the JPS team for their support and assistance behind the scenes and with this complex setup. We hope you all will be able to join us for our fall event, Breakthroughs in Brain Development Through the Lifespan, a virtual webinar from 5 to 6 p.m. Pacific time on November 9th. The invitation with more information will be shared with you very soon. And I bid you adieu because this concludes our event, and we hope you have a great rest of your afternoon. And once again, thank you, ladies, for the wonderful cooking demonstration.
Thank you.
Yay.
Thank you for having us.
Yes. Okay.